Hello and welcome to the DSP Leaders Summit on the Open Telco. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at Telecom TV, and coming up now is our Challenges and Opportunities Roundtable, where we'll be discussing the critical role of the open source community to DSP developments. Now, open source stacks already underpin the key distributed telco cloud platforms that will introduce the flexibility, the automation, and the enhanced operations needed for cloud native strategies. And this roundtable looks at the key open source trends and community initiatives impacting telco cloud strategies in 2021 and beyond. So let's introduce our special guests, and I'm delighted to welcome to the program Beth Cohen, SDN Product Strategies at Verizon; Boasman-Patel, Vice President AI and Data with the TM Forum; and Ildiko Vansha, Ecosystem Technical Lead at the Open Infrastructure Foundation. Hello everyone, very good to see you all. Thanks for taking part in the program. Now, based on input from our viewers, we've drawn up 5 key questions for discussion today, and these are the areas that are most important to our community. So here's the first one, and Beth, let me ask this of you first. What is the purpose of the telco cloud? How is its role currently envisaged?
So the telco cloud is essential to our mission and objective and business objectives. It is replacing our core infrastructure and supports our company's networks from the infrastructure perspective, but it also is a core piece of the support of our customer-facing products as well. So it really plays 2 roles, and they're both extremely important to the success of the company.
Thanks, Beth. And Ildiko, what's your views on the role of the telco cloud coming from your perspective at the foundation? How is its role currently envisaged, do you think?
First of all, I would like to reflect to what Beth was talking about, that telco cloud is not just about the cloud, but it also is representing a transformation period that the telecom industry is going through. So moving from special purpose hardware and the software stack on top, we are moving towards a more flexible, agile, and robust network. And I believe telco cloud in that sense is also representing a really crucial key factor that enables technology evolution in the telecommunication space. And I think it is a really important part in order to be able to deliver on the demands that 5G and edge computing use cases are putting against the network.
Thanks, Ildiko. And Aaron, telco cloud, very reflective of where we are in this transformation process in our industry. What would you say its purpose is, and how is its role envisaged?
Well, I completely agree with what was just been said, but it's so important. I mean, it's going to unlock 400 billion worth of growth. And, and as Beth was saying, it's about the whole migration of systems from these legacy stack systems, actually now migrating over into the cloud. And really some of the benefits are it's about scalability, and it is about openness, and also about launching these new 5G services. We all got excited with 5G. We talk about, billions of devices connected to the internet with ultra high reliability and low latency. But that then requires us moving data and applications further to the edge, and we just can't do that without cloud. So cloud is going to be absolutely transformative in delivering this new generation of services.
Thanks, Aaron. Beth.
Yeah. So one additional piece that I'd like to talk about is it's not just about cloud in the sense of the hyperscalers, in the centralized cloud. It's really about cloud as at the edge and at the core. So, telcos traditionally are delivering services, distributed services, right? That's the nature of a network. And network as a service includes that centralized core and the applications that are sitting in that core, but it also includes the applications that are at the edge. And the edge can be the telco edge, so it can be at the POP, where we have the cell tower and the 5G equipment, but it can also be at a customer edge as well. So the telcos really need to think about cloud in a far more complex way than I think most companies use cloud in sort of web server type applications. And I think that's important to understand that the telcos use the cloud. We have to think about it in very complex ways that make it more difficult for us to consume it, but it's also at the same time a way forward for us to deliver new services to our customers.
Yes, thanks, Beth. And back to you, Aaron.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. And I think a lot of attention's been really focused on, the applications and on IT and making that, cloud native IT and applications. We're now seeing that migrating right the way down, as Beth was saying, onto the network as well. And looking at, what those network domains look like, how do they get separated to enable things such as network as a service. So I think, cloud now becomes something that's end to end, which I think really hasn't had a lot of attention, which it deserves. I think this is going to be the next generation of moving towards what we call, truly cloud native IT networks, as opposed to just being cloud enabled. And I think that becomes really, really important for looking at the types of services and partnerships, which we want to be able to deliver.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Let's move on to our second viewer question here, because it's very much related. How is the telco cloud, and we've already agreed this is an end-to-end distributed telco cloud, how is the telco cloud impacted by and defined by developments within the open source community? Ildiko, maybe I should come to you for this one first. And also, is there such a thing as a defined telco cloud software stack?
I think, one of the best examples I can bring up is Openstack. It is an open source cloud platform, and it really is widely used in the all industry segments, including telecommunications. And it is also a great example of how it became a kind of almost de facto cloud platform within that industry when both vendors and then operators started to participate in the community. And it was also a process of really understanding what cloud is, what virtualization is, what all these technologies are all about. So I've been participating in that process since almost the beginning. I used to work for a telecom vendor building a telco cloud platform, and that's when I started to contribute to Openstack, as that was their choice of a base project to build their solution on. And since then, it was a couple years ago, there are a couple more components that are becoming really the main parts of the stack. Like if you look into the appearance of container technologies and Kubernetes, that is the container orchestration platform that can go on top of any cloud solution out there, public clouds, let that be Google, Amazon, even an OpenStack one, or you can also run that on bare metal. So with components like this, the telco cloud itself is also becoming more complex. So challenges in areas such as interoperability are becoming, again, more and more crucial to solve. So that's where really open source has a big advantage that this industry segment can leverage to work together on those APIs and interfaces to really overcome the challenges of interoperability and also vendor lock-in. And when we talk about like stacks, I think it is also very interesting and exciting to see that it's really not just the infrastructure layer anymore and not just the cloud anymore. If you look at activities such as ONET with the Mano space, or the Magma project that was recently open sourced by Facebook, that is also supported by the Open Infrastructure Foundation as part of an industry collaboration, which is an open mobile core network. You can really see that it's not just the infrastructure stack anymore, where telecoms are collaborating in the open source space.
Thanks, Ildiko. And Beth, is it a case of the telco cloud is impacted by and it also defines developments in the open source community?
It's a feedback loop. There's no question. So, it's no secret that Openstack has become the de facto cloud that's used in the telecom world. However, at the same time, the telcos are actively looking at containers, Kubernetes, and other, cloud native. I hate to say Kubernetes and cloud native in the same breath, because it's, cloud native doesn't necessarily have to be, a container. But certainly the telcos are actively looking at containers. We've deployed them for some of our greenfield. 5G has been greenfield for us, which gives us the advantage of being able to bring in containerized applications. But the majority of our networks are still run on VMs. That's not going to go away anytime soon. The Anakit project, which is part of the LFN, it was really started with the premise that we needed a reference model, reference architectures, and reference deployments across the telco world. And we started, the two that we're currently working on are a reference architecture that's based on OpenStack, and a reference architecture based on Kubernetes. What's been happening is, as we develop these models, develop these requirements, we're feeding them back into those projects. OpenStack's been fairly stable because it's been around for a while, but the Kubernetes and CNCF has actually started a work group specifically to address the telco requirements, which up until recently, I'd say maybe a year and a half ago, was not really part of the CNCF's vocabulary. So there's definitely interest in extending that, and I think there's a good mechanism to bring those requirements, the telco requirements, into the open source communities.
Thanks, Beth. And we will pick up on Anakit a bit later on in our discussion. But for now, Aaron, do you see the same thing? Do you see this feedback loop?
Absolutely. I mean, look at what we're doing at TM4, we're creating what we call the new open digital architecture, right? Which is all about, having an open digital architecture, which is cloud native, it's AI and data driven, and it uses APIs. And we're looking at then creating this software marketplace whereby people put applications, into that marketplace, and then you can literally plug and play, into your IT and networks. And that becomes really important. But all of that has to be done, with TM4, we use our members in the industry to do that. And it's the same, with open source, is that you've got to be able to crowdfund and get all of this, get all the requirements together to make sure that actually we get away from things such as, vendor lock-in, because really to be able to have the, the flexibility and the agility which is required from cloud, you've got to have a community of people which are developing, the standardization around this constantly and feeding into it. And you just can't do it on your own. And CSPs have got an absolutely critical role to make sure that, as we migrate over to the cloud, that we're creating, the applications and the software which is needed to deliver their business requirements. So it's absolutely critical, and I can't say that enough.
Good. Yes, we are supportive of the ecosystem and collaboration here. Absolutely essential. Brings us on to our third question for this roundtable. Beth, I'm going to come to you first for this one. To what extent should network operators be involved with and also influence open source development? Should any particular part of the telecoms ecosystem perhaps have a more influential role than others?
So I have two answers to that. One is absolutely it's essential. Certainly it's critical for the telcos to not only step up to the plate with requirements, but I think it's also important for telcos to contribute actual code and actual applications. That's not been a traditional role that the telcos have had in the past. They've relied on their vendors, and I think that's been a shift that's happened over the last 3-4 years, where telcos are, in fact, writing our code. My personal experience was when we started developing our early edge networking software services for our customers, we ended up writing a whole lot of the code ourselves just because simply we could not buy it. There was nothing out there. So, when when the telcos are at the cutting edge, sometimes they do have to do it themselves. But I think it's also important to share that out with the open source community. And the second part of the question is that there's really two communities within any given telco. There's the infrastructure people, the infrastructure planning people, and then there's the people that do the product. I happen to be on the product side. So I bring a very different perspective of what needs to be part of the requirements than the infrastructure people. And I think both need to contribute and both need to participate in the open source community to get the requirements that are so important for the telcos to function.
Thanks, Beth. And Aaron, what's your views on getting the operators, the CSPs, involved in open source discussions and the open source process? And is there any difference between those on the more product focus and those perhaps more infrastructure focus, as Beth was saying? What's your advice to operators?
Well, I think we've seen a massive shift, and I agree with Beth. I think for some of those reasons, because code hasn't been available for some of the services that they want to do, and we're seeing here at TM Forum, service providers wanting to provide more code, wanting to be and develop their own services. I think this is the beauty of cloud. As we migrate over there and use things like AI and these new services, actually, some of the products just aren't out there, and not necessarily everyone has the skills. So we're seeing different departments, different people wanting to contribute more, wanting to learn more, to solve real business issues. And I think that's what's important. Everybody, though, has to have an equal say in this for an ecosystem to work. And I'm a huge proponent, as we are at TM4, of actually having a fully, working and operative ecosystem. And you've also got to look at where you're going to partner, because depending on what services that you want to offer them, and is going to depend on who has a little bit more weight in certain areas. But fundamentally, we all have to be able to connect in to those services. So if you think about some of the end-to-end cloud services, working with the hyperscalers, maybe, for example, well, you don't want to have to create custom connectors every time you want to, use each other's services, or if you want to swap in and swap out. That's the whole benefit of open source. So we've all got to get involved, look and understand what our role is going to be to make sure actually, we can really now start to go forward with our developments, because I think there's been a bit of reluctance, in the past. I think we've been too heavy as a community, maybe on the vendors, the operators not having, a big enough say. And I think that is fundamentally going to change as we start to see business models changing.
Thank you, Aaron. And Ildiko, what's your views here? There's obviously a big skill pot for the network operators to tap into, but also they should take part as well and contribute.
I think this is a very important question, and I can only reflect back to what Beth was saying again, in terms of the understanding of what contribution is, and that it is not just about code. In fact, there are various ways of contributing to an open source project, and once people and organizations understand that, it becomes much easier for them to participate. And when it comes to the telecommunication space and operators, it is really crucial to get both their feedback in terms of the bits and pieces and software and building blocks that they are using from open source projects, as well as their requirements that they have, because they are in the best position to see where innovation is going, what their customers need, and what they need to be able to deliver on all that. So when it comes to the open source space, communities are really eager and in need to hear that feedback and to hear those requirements directly from the operators, so that they really understand where those requirements are coming from and really what they are. So communication really is very important here. And even when it comes to code, I think it is very important to mention that even in that space, you don't have to necessarily contribute a big complex feature in order to be able to participate. If you have a small fix for a bug that is really crucial for you to get fixed, then you can contribute that. You can contribute test code or integration work again, or really just do some reviews on a feature that is getting implemented by someone else, but it is also really important for you. So in that sense, this really is about participation here, and it is really important that every actor in the ecosystem participates.
Thanks, Ildiko. And Beth, you'd like to come in with an additional point?
Yes, I would like to add that another factor is the business aspect of it, you know, one of the roles of the open source community is to produce position papers. I know that we're publishing one on automation and testing of NFV that just went out today, and so that's so important because it really sets the tone, because it is a group effort, right? The testing paper was done by the end user advisory group for LFN, which you know has a representation of 20 or 30 global telecoms. So we really have the voice of the general telecom community, and that's so important to get that message out, and that's important from a business perspective from the telecoms, because then they can as one of my friends says, you don't want to, telecoms don't compete in what great infrastructure we stand up. We compete with our on services. So, why can't we be more efficient about delivering the infrastructure and the cloud infrastructure that the open source community can really have us work together on?
Okay, thanks, Beth. Well, I know Aaron and Ildiko both want to come in on this one. So Aaron, let me come to you first.
No, I think, but I just wanted to put what Beth was saying. I think it's so important that, we're seeing a big shift in telecoms, right? That the IT now becomes an enabler, particularly for the business. And it's this whole idea of moving towards, cloud native components, and infrastructure is actually that the business people, don't have to go to IT and to get whole systems rewritten to deliver, what business services they need. It should be much more of a plug and play approach. So, the same thing what we do here at the TM Forum with all our members, we have a business work stream as well as a technical work stream. And I just really would like to, bring back on those points that everybody needs to get involved, whether you're on the business or the technical side. It is about requirements and also what you have to deliver for those business requirements. So really understanding those 2 points of view is critical if we are truly to transform as an industry. And I just really wanted to emphasize those really good points that were made earlier, because it really is fundamental.
Yeah, you're right. They are fundamental and great points. Ildiko, like to come in?
Yeah, I also just wanted to reflect on what Beth was saying in terms of the test paper, and really just the activities on sharing both knowledge as well as being pioneers in an area. Like both Beth and I were participating in writing the Open Infra Edge Computing Group white papers. We have 2 of them now, and it shows really well how the telecommunication industry is leading the way in edge computing, for instance. And it also shows in that paper and how we put that together, all the understanding that the telecom industry already has about that space because of building out the networks to be able to support all those edge use cases that went into that paper. So I think it is also a really great example how both telecoms and anyone really in the ecosystem and around the globe who is interested in a challenge or a problem or an area of innovation can come and participate and really work together. So the focus really is not just on who is influential or who has to be influential, but really on the common goals and challenges that we can now work together to solve.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Plenty of opportunities, but equally, operators have finite resources to go around, which brings us to our next viewer question here. Beth, the viewer question is, what are the main open source initiatives that telcos either need to be involved with or at least aware of when it comes to telco cloud?
Oh, that's such a difficult question because there's finite resources, and anybody who's been in the open source community knows that, we know who we are. We all show up in all the different forums together, and it's very difficult. We're very spread thin. So I I'm not going to name a single forum because I don't, but I think the answer is we have to go for what's going to get the best bang for our buck, because the people who do this work tend to be the same people, so they're spread in 6 different directions. And I personally have had to cut back on things that I would love to do, but as I like to say, to my open source colleagues, I have a real job too, within Verizon. So it's super important to contribute, and I encourage my telco colleagues to contribute more to these forums, open source as well as standards. I think traditionally we tended to sort of fall back on the standards bodies, but I think there's been a shift in recent years toward understanding that open source is very important as well. I'd say equally important. And open source works so much faster. Getting those requirements into actual projects, can happen over a period of 6 to 8 months, as opposed to several years where, at the end of several years, we have a standard. And my understanding is the standards community is responding and speeding up as well, and using some of the techniques that were developed in the open source community to make the standards more agile as well. So I think there's been a lot of synergy between all those groups, which I think benefits everybody and benefits the telcos. So I encourage my colleagues to continue to put resources into supporting the open source communities.
Yeah, here. And at the risk of upsetting our viewers, I'm going to adapt this question ever so slightly. Aaron, rather than name specific communities or initiatives, is there a problem that there are so many? It is difficult for operators with finite resources to get the biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to come to, respond to Beth on, because I think, as an industry, at TM Forum, what we're doing as a member, association organisation, we're working with, other SDOs, other bodies to make sure actually that there's lack of crossover. Sometimes there's overlap. So I think we're doing a much better job as well in making sure, we all understand what our role is, within each of the area of the stack. So, at TM Forum, we're looking at, transforming OSS, BSS, and we're looking at the cloud native, production element. Is really critical. Then we very much work with other organizations, Etsy, for example. And so I think we're doing a much better job because, as Beth was saying, it's often the same people that are involved in different standards organizations working there. So if we can continue, as an industry to get much better cooperation, really work together, I think a lot of those challenges are going to go away, because at the end of the day, we all have our own areas and our focuses that we look at. And I think it's about to be proud about doing that and to say, look, we'll get our bits absolutely right, and we'll look at how do we connect, with other organizations as opposed to trying to, solve everything end to end. And I think if we do that and have much more open relationships with each other, we really are going to, speed things up. And as Beth was saying, I think one of the great jobs I've seen, not only from TM Forum, but other, industry associations or standards body, is actually moving towards a more agile methodology, making the standards more agile, so we can really start to develop them in real time and really move towards kind of that software, DevOps approach. So that is happening in the industry. I think, it's taken us a bit longer maybe than some other organizations or some other bodies, but it's happening now. And I would say, as Beth says, we absolutely depend on our members. I know everybody in open source does, and people who, collect the crowdsources their work. So get involved and really enable us to work together to make sure you've got your desired outcomes, because we're all ready and willing to do that.
Excellent. And Ildiko, either, are there some communities or initiatives that telcos need to be involved with for telco cloud, Or let's look at the wider question here. And there's a lot of opportunities out there. How can we all maximize our own time and output?
So I think, especially if you look into the more general question, if you look at open source itself, as it becomes kind of a mainstream or de facto way of collaborative software development, you can experience like a big boom in terms of projects in various areas. Like if you look into the edge landscape, for instance, when it comes to open source projects, you will find a million projects and groups out there, and especially in that landscape, you can really nicely see the life cycle, like when the organizations and people are starting to explore an area, there are a lot of projects popping up, and then once everybody's starting to understand the business drivers, the solutions, and how it will all look in production, then comes the consolidation period, and these groups are starting to collaborate, and then where it makes sense, maybe even merge and really having more consolidated efforts. So I think that really is true to open source in general, both in terms of learning how open source works and participating, throwing out my own projects there, and then discovering other efforts and start collaborating and consolidating. So along those lines, also if you look into, for instance, the Open Infrastructure Foundation communities, they are putting a lot of effort into collaborating adjacent communities, really with communities and projects where they have integration points with on the software side. Like we collaborate a lot with CNCF groups like Kubernetes, or the Edge efforts under CNCF, or Eclipse Foundation projects, Linux Foundation networking, Edge, and other projects as well. So I think that this collaboration really is crucial, and it is not just on the community side. Like within especially bigger organization, they are also responsible for making this collaboration happen. Like at large companies with multiple divisions and branches in various countries around the globe, it is really important to have internal communication as well, and have a good strategy and communication, because once that happens internally, that will provide also a much better collaboration within the open source communities as well. And it is especially true when we talk about standardization. In my experience from earlier years when I used to work for a telecom vendor, it was almost a completely separate effort to deal with the standardization side and the open source engagements. So once the communication between those groups started to happen, we were much more efficient in terms of doing what we needed to get done.
Thanks, Ilika. Communication is the key, as always. Brings us to our last question of this roundtable. Beth, I'm going to start with you for reasons that will become apparent very quickly. To what extent are initiatives such as the LFN's Anuket of use to the telecom ecosystem?
So Anuket, which was the former CNTT, I was one of the founders. So yes, that's why I was asked that. And it touched a nerve. It identified a gap in the systems, in the gap in the ecosystem that needed to be filled. So what Anuket does is it's creating reference architectures, reference model, reference architectures, and reference infrastructure implementations of infrastructure to support CNFs and VNFs. And that was the gap that we identified. There was a lot of orchestration tools. There was a lot of work on the CNFs and at the time it was more VNFs, and now CNFs, but there was little attention being paid to the infrastructure that was actually going to be supporting these things. And that's where the CNTT was came into being about, and it evolved over the last year and a half. We got tremendous response from the not only the operator community but also the vendor community, because when we founded that project, right from the beginning, we said it isn't just the operators that are there to hand down on high the the requirements to the vendors. It really needs to be a collaborative effort, and that's something that was new. I think that was a new way of thinking about the work, and it also needed to be spread over all the entire ecosystem. It couldn't be just an operator going out and hiring a vendor and dropping a couple $1 million on a bespoke system. It really needed to be thought of more holistically, and absolutely the response within the community was tremendous. The initial meeting was 15 people in Barcelona, and it was all telco and open source people. The follow-up meeting, which was a couple months later, had I think it was about 75 or 80 people from across the community, and it was held in the middle of a brutal, record-breaking heat wave in Paris. But it was it was an incredible experience, and a lot of really good came out of it, and the project has only grown. As of January 1st, it became Aniket when it merged with the OPNFV project to really create that holistic feedback loop of requirements, architectures, implementations, testing functionality, and then a loop back. So far it's been incredibly a successful project that's only growing.
Thank you, Beth. And Ildiko, let me broaden this question out then to you. To what extent are wide-ranging, important projects, open source projects, of use to the telecom ecosystem? Because we heard Beth there talk about, it's a bit of a case study of what happened there when you involve the operators and the wider community and get the holistic approach going.
Well, just again reflecting back to what Beth was saying, I think efforts like Aniket are really showing again the life cycle of open source that I was talking about earlier. Like I think projects like Aniket show the next phase in terms of a collaboration starting between the operators and the vendors with really a common understanding of the goals that everyone would like to achieve. And I think it really is crucial for the success of the telecommunications industry to have this communication and collaboration going. And I think it is also showing how the mindset change happens in terms of stepping away from vendor lock-in as a business model and rather building infrastructure models together like vendors and operators. Obviously, it's not like there will be one solution that everybody will use. You still have configuration options, and you can also use various components that you would like to build your infrastructure from. But the basic set of features and functionality and the understanding about that is really what everybody needs. And now with efforts like this, we also have places to discuss and come to an understanding.
Thanks, Ildiko. And Aaron, final thoughts from you. To what extent can the telecoms ecosystem benefit from these open source initiatives?
I think they can benefit by a huge amount. As I said earlier on, 400 billion of growth is available. People who are willing to transform, be more open. We've got to be able to connect together. CSPs can't do it alone. They might need to partner with each other. They're going to need to partner, with new companies which are coming on the horizon. I mean, who knows what's next? We're seeing a huge revolution, in the space of the digital world. So, open source, getting community projects, coming together. It's not just about necessarily open source, but it's about open minds. It's about working together to collaborate together. And really, if you do that, I think telco will really truly transform. Without doing this, we're going to really just end up being connectivity providers. And I know for all the members that I talk to at TM, they want to go beyond that, and that's why it really does become important to enable an open digital ecosystem.
Digital services provision. That's what it's all about, Aaron. Thank you very much. And to all of you, because we have to draw our discussion to a close at this point. Thanks to you all for participating and sharing your views and opinions. Now, if you're watching this on day one of our DSP Leaders Summit on the Open Telco, then don't forget to send us any questions you have on this subject, and we'll try and answer them in our live after-show program later today. And do take part in our online poll. You can find it below this video player window next to the Q&A app. All of today's programs are available to view online here at Telecom TV, and we'll be back tomorrow with another roundtable discussion for you. Until then, thanks for watching and goodbye.